Hi, my name is Allison Smith. The book I chose for the book report is called Living with Fire, Ecology, and Policy for the 21st Century. This book is not very long. It was written in 2008 by Sarah Jensen and Guy McPherson. Sarah Jensen is a private land conservation associate, and Guy McPherson is a professor at the University of Arizona. He has written books before this. The book is about how fires interact with the environment, and then in turn how humans interact with the fire that interacts with the environment. Touches on how humans have been trying to fight fires and how that has affected the environment itself, how it affects the introduction of non-native species, how it affects the fire resistance of trees who are usually exposed to fire and how that helps. Goes over current policies, how the government has been handling fire ecology in the past and how it's currently doing it. Current policies typically is mass suppression. It costs a lot of money. It touches on, how suppression maybe isn't the best route because it affects the environment in such a way that's not good long term. The book goes over how, humans try so hard to fight this thing because it, ruins properties, it ruins the logging industry. The book goes into detail how until humans sort out their priorities, money versus nature, and stops trying to conquer it, it's not really going to help anything. This book primarily tries to inform common citizens on how fire really isn't a bad thing. It costs more money to fight the fires than it would to just let them go and replace the property that they destroy. There are many examples of how, for example, how Yellowstone is one of the first mass examples of fire suppression being put into effect within, modern day world. And the way that fire managers tried to fight it in Yellowstone was that they did prescribed fires, so smaller fires to get rid of the fuels in the forest that cause these large, intense fires. Something the book also touches on is the difference between intensity versus large scale. You can have a fire that burns millions of acres, but if it's not that intense, then it's not as harmful as, the California fires that have recently been happening. And this book, was written quite a while ago. It was written over a decade ago. But the California fires were very, very intense. And the book talks about how, if we try to control the fire, we are wasting tax money. We are putting firefighters at risk for really no reason. There's no evidence that supports that the way that we are fighting fires is actually fighting them. In fact, this book goes into a lot of detail about how we're actually hurting more than we're helping. In order to suppress fires, you have to set up boundaries. You have to, a lot of times, use these chemicals that hurt the environment. There's many examples in the book of, soil retention being moved and causing erosion at an accelerated rate when it doesn't need to be. We're not the first, Americans aren't the first to try to control fires. The book goes in, touches briefly on how Native Americans used to try to fight fires by just letting them go. They would move their camps around the fires, which is something that modern day people are not very good at. And the book touches how, we're trying to fight this thing that actually helps. It helps, kind of get rid of all the guck that's on the forest floor. It helps to, circulate different species. And there are a lot of trees that are in forests that need fire in order to continue to grow. So the book touches on that. It was very easy to follow, very, not as technical as it could have been. It did make the problem seem like it can't be solved. The last chapter in the book is about recommended policies and the plan to go forward, but it doesn't really present like this is what, steps 1, 2, 3. It's like, well, we need to stop trying to conquer fire and start working with it. It didn't really talk about how to do that, so that's where the book kind of lost me a little bit. But the science was backed up. I learned a lot about, that fire isn't the enemy, that we're actually the enemies in a lot of cases. There are so many government organizations that try to deal with this, and they're not doing a very good job, and they're, spending money, and it's in a way that's very convoluted, and citizens don't really get a voice. They don't know how to get a voice. They don't know which outlets to use. So I do recommend this book for anybody who is just curious on the subject like I was. I was very curious of, fire has been around longer than we have. So why are we trying so hard to fight it when we should, control it where we can, let it go where it needs to be? Clearly if fire was detrimental, we wouldn't have life here. We're not living on the sun. So this kind of reinforced that, this book did, and, I learned how the Native Americans used to handle it, how there are some trees that need fire. I didn't know that. I know the soil is a lot richer after a fire, but I didn't know that there are a lot of species that depend on it. And even when we try to fight the fire, we hurt everything else. So this book got its point across that fire is not a super bad thing, that it's okay that it runs, and I really enjoyed it. It's very easy to read, very quick to read, and I didn't feel like I get lost. So Living with Fire, it's a very good book.